There comes a moment in life when you realize that the hostility directed toward you has very little to do with your actions, and far more to do with the unseen depths within others. You may wonder why a friend suddenly grows distant, why a colleague begins to undermine you, or why someone who once praised you now resents your presence. At first glance, you might believe it's your fault, that you made a mistake, that you misstepped somewhere along the way. But often, the truth is far more complex, far more hidden. It is not your actions they are reacting to. It is the shadow within themselves that they have never dared to confront. The human psyche is not simply light and clarity. Every person carries within them a shadow, the repository of rejected traits, disowned desires, buried shame, and unacknowledged fears. These are the aspects of the self that people cannot bear to face. Instead of integrating them, they push them down into the unconscious. Yet the shadow never disappears. It lingers, waiting, heavy and silent, until the right trigger calls it forth. And that trigger, more often than not, is another person. You may become the embodiment of what someone has denied within themselves. Perhaps your confidence highlights the insecurity they cannot admit. Perhaps your discipline exposes the laziness they've hidden. Perhaps your compassion reminds them of their cruelty. Or your freedom reveals the chains they have willingly locked themselves into. When this happens, they do not see you. They see their shadow in you and they despise it. Hatred, envy, and resentment are often nothing more than projections of the unclaimed parts of the self. The hidden nature of hatred. This is why people can treat you like an enemy without you ever harming them. They wage war not because of your actions, but because your existence unsettles their illusion. You become the mirror that shows them who they truly are, and that reflection is unbearable. Instead of facing their own darkness, they attempt to destroy the mirror. They speak against you, sabotage you, or distance themselves from you, believing that by removing you, they can remove the shadow. But the shadow follows them everywhere, whispering, waiting, demanding recognition. Understanding this dynamic changes everything. It allows you to stop taking hatred personally. When you see clearly, you realize they are not fighting you, they are fighting themselves. They are not repelled by your essence, but by the part of their own essence they have buried and disowned. You simply became the stage upon which their inner conflict is projected. Think of the person who ridicules kindness. Beneath the mockery lies a shadow filled with unhealed wounds, a longing for tenderness they never received. Think of the one who despises confidence. Beneath their hostility lies a shadow suffocated by doubt, a self-image so fragile that another's strength feels like an insult. Think of the individual who cannot tolerate another's freedom. Their shadow carries chains of fear and obedience, a suffocating need for external approval. When you stand in your light, you bring their darkness into focus, and many would rather blame you than look within. This is why the shadow is so dangerous. It convinces people that what they hate in others is real, when in truth it is only a reflection of themselves. It is easier to attack the external than to acknowledge the internal. It is easier to criticize another's success than to admit one's own passivity. It is easier to condemn someone's authenticity than to confront one's own false identity. But you must also recognize that the shadow is not only in others, it is within you as well. Just as you awaken discomfort in others, others awaken discomfort in you. The traits you despise, the people who irritate you, the qualities you mock, all of these may point toward your own unclaimed shadow. To deny this is to live in blindness, forever blaming, forever projecting. To see it is to begin the work of integration, the work of making peace with the darker corners of your being. The shadow within others will continue to operate silently, shaping their judgments, distorting their perceptions, guiding their hostility. They may never realize that you are not their enemy, but their mirror. They may never understand that what they despise in you is the unhealed wound within themselves. Their struggle may remain hidden, their projection unacknowledged, their hostility unexplainable. But if you see it clearly, you will no longer be deceived by appearances. You will know that beneath the mask of hatred, beneath the eruption of envy, beneath the wall of rejection, there is a shadow that refuses to be seen. And it is that shadow that speaks through them, not their conscious self. Authenticity and the mirror of truth. Authenticity is one of the most disarming forces a human being can embody. To be authentic means to live without the constant need for masks, to speak with a voice that is not borrowed, and to act in alignment with one's inner compass. Yet, as liberating as authenticity feels to the one who embraces it, it often awakens resistance, hostility, and even hatred in others. Because authenticity is not just a way of being, it is a mirror that exposes falseness. When you step into your authentic self, you unknowingly challenge the illusions others depend upon for survival. Many people live behind masks. They construct identities that are palatable, roles that win approval, personas that shield them from rejection. These masks become armor against the world, disguises carefully maintained to keep insecurities hidden. But the presence of someone authentic destabilizes that armor. It reveals the fragility of the mask. It makes the carefully constructed identity feel weak, hollow, and temporary. And this is why authenticity is often perceived as a threat. When you are authentic, you remind others of what they are not. You remind them of the compromises they've made, the truths they've silenced, the roles they've played just to belong. Your presence becomes a silent confrontation. You do not need to say, "You are not real," yet something in their unconscious registers it, and registers it as danger. And danger awakens defense. That defense often appears as rejection, criticism, or contempt toward the one who simply dares to live truthfully. This is why authenticity can feel isolating. You wonder why people withdraw, why some turn cold, why others subtly undermine your presence. It is not always because of who you are, but because of the way your authenticity disrupts their illusion. To them, you become intolerable, not for any harm you've done, but for the way your being challenges the stability of the roles they cling to. Consider how unsettling it is to encounter someone who refuses to conform. Their refusal reminds you of your own compliance. Think of the one who speaks truth when everyone else chooses silence. Their courage calls out your fear, whether they intend to or not. Think of the individual who lives unapologetically, whose choices reflect freedom instead of approval-seeking. Their freedom highlights the chains around your own decisions. Authenticity, by its very nature, awakens discomfort. It forces people to look inward, and many are not ready to face what they see. But authenticity is not arrogance. It is not rebellion for the sake of rebellion. It is alignment, the simple act of existing as you are, without distortion. Yet this simplicity is what makes it powerful. A mask requires effort to maintain. A lie requires constant reinforcement. An image demands continuous energy. But authenticity demands nothing. It flows. It stands. It breathes. And this effortless presence exposes the exhausting effort others are pouring into their illusions. This is why some will quietly resent the authentic individual. They will mock them, labeling them naive or self-absorbed. They will accuse them of arrogance or eccentricity. These are defense mechanisms, ways to diminish the threat without having to change themselves. Because to truly accept authenticity means to question their own inauthenticity, and that requires a courage most do not yet have. It is easier to scorn the one who stands in truth than to face the prison of one's own falsehood. Authenticity also, the one who refuses the script, who breaks the role, becomes disruptive. They expose the fragility of the system. They prove that the role is not absolute, that the script is not law. And those who depend on the system's stability will often target the authentic one as the problem, when in reality, it is their authenticity that reveals the problem. The silent revolution of authenticity. Yet authenticity does more than provoke hostility. It awakens longing deep inside. Even those who resent authenticity feel the stirring of desire for it. They see in you the possibility of freedom. They sense in you the courage they lack. They may attack you, but beneath that attack lies envy, a painful recognition of what they have buried within themselves. Your presence reminds them of their unlived life, of the self they abandoned to meet expectations. And for some, this reminder is intolerable. Authenticity is not safe. It does not guarantee admiration or acceptance. In fact, it often guarantees the opposite. To live authentically is to accept that you will be misunderstood, judged, and even resented. But it also means you will no longer live enslaved to the shifting opinions of others. You will not contort yourself to fit illusions. You will not betray your inner compass for temporary approval. You will stand as you are even when it unsettles others. And perhaps that is why authenticity feels threatening, because it is contagious. The authentic self does not live only for itself. It inspires others, consciously or unconsciously, to question their own masks. And questioning is the first step toward transformation. This is the silent revolution of authenticity. It destabilizes illusions, awakens envy, and provokes hostility. But it also plants the seed of freedom in the very people who resist it. Unseen power dynamics. A human interaction is rarely as simple as it appears on the surface. Every conversation, every relationship, every exchange of words or silence carries within it a current of power. Sometimes it flows softly, almost invisible. Sometimes it surges with undeniable force. Yet most of the time, these dynamics remain hidden, operating in the background, shaping behaviors, guiding reactions, influencing decisions. The unspoken war of power is not always about dominance in the obvious sense. It is about control, influence, validation, and the unacknowledged desire to shape another person's reality. We like to believe relationships are built purely on love, respect, or shared goals. But beneath those noble words lie subtler motives. One person seeks reassurance of their worth, another craves recognition, another wants obedience, and still another thrives on superiority. These needs are not always declared, but they play out in the ways people treat one another. When someone suddenly turns cold, when affection turns to hostility, when a friend begins to compete instead of support, it is often because an invisible balance of power has shifted. Power dynamics are rarely equal. Even in the closest relationships, there is an undercurrent of who leads and who follows, who validates and who seeks validation, who influences and who is influenced. These roles can change over time, and when they do, tension often arises. A person who once felt in control may sense they are losing influence. The one who relied on your weakness may feel unsettled when you begin to grow stronger. The individual who thrived on your dependence may feel threatened when you show independence. These subtle shifts often ignite resentment, not because of your actions alone, but because of what those actions symbolize: a rearranging of the silent hierarchy, the hidden balance of control. Consider how people react when you set boundaries. The moment you draw a line, you disturb the balance. The one who benefited from your compliance suddenly feels their control slipping. Their hostility is not about the boundary itself, but about the loss of unspoken power. Or think about how people respond when you succeed. For some, your achievement becomes a reminder of their lack, a disruption of the unspoken agreement that kept you beneath them. The relationship shifts, and the silent power dynamic can no longer hold. Even in ordinary interactions, these dynamics play out. In conversation, who interrupts and who listens. In groups, who commands attention and who fades into the background. In families, who is deferred to and who is dismissed. These patterns may appear trivial, but they reveal the quiet distribution of power that governs relationships. And when one person begins to resist, when they step out of the expected role, friction inevitably follows. The unseen nature of power dynamics makes them especially dangerous, because they are rarely acknowledged and easily misinterpreted. You may believe someone dislikes you for no reason, when in truth they sense a threat to their control. You may think you disappointed someone with your choices, when in truth those choices revealed how little power they actually held over you. The hostility you encounter is not about who you are, but about what your presence disrupts in their hidden balance of control. Power does not always mean authority or dominance in an obvious sense. It is the quiet tension beneath the surface, the invisible current that determines who feels safe and who feels seen. Sometimes, power is as subtle as emotional leverage, the ability to make someone feel guilty, the capacity to withhold affection, the silent pressure of expectation. A person may never raise their voice, yet they wield enormous influence by threatening withdrawal, by offering approval only when you conform, by manipulating the unspoken rules of connection. When you stop playing along, when you stop giving them that leverage, the structure collapses. And few things breed resentment faster than the collapse of a hidden structure of power. To recognize these dynamics is to understand that conflict is rarely about surface disagreements. It is about the deeper struggle for influence, the fear of losing control, the insecurity of being overshadowed. People rarely say, "I resent you because you no longer make me feel superior," or "I am angry because I can't manipulate you anymore." Instead, they frame it as betrayal, arrogance, selfishness, or disrespect. These words disguise the deeper truth. The power they once held over you has slipped away. Yet the desire for power is not inherently malicious. It is rooted in human nature. People seek control because they fear chaos. They crave influence because it reassures them of their worth. They cling to hierarchies because it makes them feel safe in a world of uncertainty. The problem arises when these desires remain unacknowledged, when they twist into silent expectations, when they harden into hostility toward those who do not comply. You cannot always dismantle these dynamics, nor can you always prevent the resentment they create. But by seeing them clearly, you free yourself from confusion. You stop internalizing hatred as if it were born from your flaws. You begin to see that much of what people project onto you is not about you at all. It is about the shifting currents of invisible power, the silent hierarchies that govern human connection, the fragile sense of control that people protect at all costs. Human beings do not simply see others as they are. They see themselves reflected back through others. Every interaction becomes a kind of mirror, a silent revelation of hidden truths, unacknowledged wounds, and secret desires. What we admire in others often reveals what we long to cultivate within ourselves. What we despise in others often exposes the parts of us we refuse to face. This is the mirror effect, the undeniable truth that the judgments we cast outward are more often than not reflections of our inner world, the reflection of the shadow. The mirror effect explains why people can suddenly turn against you without cause. They are not truly reacting to you. They are reacting to what you awaken within them. When you embody qualities they have suppressed, you become the mirror that reveals what they are missing, what they are avoiding, what they are ashamed of. And for many, that reflection is intolerable. Instead of facing it, they attack the mirror. They criticize, they resent, they distance themselves, not because you harmed them, but because your existence has brought their shadow into focus. Imagine the person who mocks your ambition. Beneath their laughter lies the sting of their own unfulfilled potential. Imagine the one who cannot stand your confidence. Their hostility may be the echo of their buried insecurity. Consider the individual who despises your freedom. Their anger may rise from the chains of fear and approval that bind them. The unspoken nature of envy makes it one of the most potent forces in human relationships. It erodes trust, corrodes connection, and turns admiration into animosity. Yet when you recognize the silence of envy for what it is, you stop misinterpreting it. You no longer shrink yourself to avoid triggering others. You no longer beg for explanations when someone withdraws. You no longer doubt your worth because of another's coldness. Instead, you see envy for what it truly is, the shadow. It is not a reflection of your failure, but a reflection of another's unclaimed potential. You realize that the silence surrounding your victories is often louder than applause, for in that silence lies the unspoken confession of envy that words will never reveal.